Okay, just as we just learned the three processes of memory: encoding, storage, and retrieval, but we're also going to find that there's three types of memory. And these three types of memory are sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Let's look at sensory memory first. Sensory memory takes in information from the senses and makes our world seem stable. So there's two types. There's iconic memory and echoic memory. Iconic memory is visual memory that lasts for a half a second, and echoic memory is auditory memory that lasts for 2 seconds. So if I don't know how many of you would notice if you're blinking, but we're always blinking, but we never notice it. And the reason why we never notice it is because we have iconic memory. Is the visual information that goes into your eye is held there for half a second. That will compensate for the very short period of darkness that a blink causes, and so makes our world seem stable. Also, while you're having a conversation with someone, watch their eyes. They're constantly darting back and forth, going up and down. They're taking in different parts of the environment. But even though the eyes are constantly moving back and forth and shaking and so on and so forth, we don't see our world as shaking. We see it as just very stable. That's because the iconic memory is always making things seem like they're very stable because it's allowing these changes to occur, and then it's piecing all the visual information together. Now, echoic memory it's like you hear an echo in your ear. Now, what echoic memory does is it allows us to hear the beginning of the sentence and the end of the sentence and to keep them together so you can make sense of it. If you didn't have this echoic memory, by the time you got to the end of the sentence, you would have probably forgotten what the beginning of the sentence said, and then how are you going to make sense of it? So let's just go back. Sensory memory takes in it's a type of memory that's taken in from the senses, and it makes our world seem stable. Okay, so here I already went over iconic memory on the last slide, but here's again. It holds a visual picture in your brain for half a second so that you can process multiple aspects of a given scene. Echoic memory holds auditory information in your brain for 2 seconds so that you can connect the auditory messages. Okay, so that was sensory memory. Let's go on to the second type of memory. This is called short-term memory. Short-term memory. Information moves from sensory memory to short-term memory if you pay attention to it. Short-term memory lasts for 2 to 30 seconds. It has a limited capacity and a limited duration. So, once the senses take the information in, if you don't pay attention to it, then it's just gone. But if you do pay attention to something and you start processing it, there's a part of the brain that will hold it for 2 to 30 seconds, and then it'll see, should we transfer it to long-term memory or should we just let it go? Okay, let's study this next slide for a few seconds. Okay, try to write down as many things as you can remember. According to the limited capacity of short-term memory, you should have been able to remember no more than 9 things and no less than 5 things. So you should have had about 7 plus or minus 2 things written down on your paper. The reason is this short-term memory, I said it has a limited capacity. It seems to be only able to hold about 7 pieces of new information. So it's interesting that a lot of our important numbers are broken up. like your phone number is 7 digits. Now in Los Angeles we have to remember the area code, but usually a lot of us just hold the area code. You either hear, is it 626, is it 909, is it 323, is it 213, is it 310? And the minute that you hear that, you just hold that as one chunk, and then you try to hold on to the other 7 digits. The limited capacity of short-term memory. It is believed that short-term memory can only hold 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information. A chunk is a meaningful set of organization. So again, when you're presented with new information, you should only be able to remember about 7 plus or minus 2 things. So what that has meaning for you is that you should, when you're studying new material, you should break it up into chunks. You should break it into chunks of just 7 pieces of new information. So let's look at your first lecture. The first lecture, it had a little introduction, and it talked about the definition of psychology and the goals of psychology. So you should separate that out as one chunk. And then what you had is you've had the 5 researchers. You should break that up into, just remember those 5 researchers. Then you go on to remembering the 5 schools of psychology. Is break that up. Don't try to study everything all together. Break it up into smaller spaces. Then the 5 research methods, break it up into smaller sections. So if I asked you this, hopefully you can give me the answers. If you had a 4th grader and they said they had to memorize all the states and all the capitals, hopefully you would know the best way to help them with that. And the best way to help them with that is that they would break the information down, is you have them learn maybe 4 states at a time. Don't try to go over too many at once, just 4 at a time. Wait till they learn that, wait till they learn that. And when they learn it so well, it can become one chunk. And then you can add a little more, a little more. Okay, the limited duration of short-term memory is if you didn't transfer the information to long-term memory, the information from short-term memory will be lost after approximately 30 seconds. Long-term memory. Long-term memory has an infinite capacity, so it is not limited to 7 plus or minus 2, and an infinite duration. You will never need to worry about filling up your memory. There are different types of long-term memory. We have declarative memory, which is factual memory. This is for facts. There's 2 different types of facts that seem to be stored in different ways. So an episodic memory is facts that happen to you personally. So our personal events seem to be stored in a type of memory called episodic memory, and they're a little bit different. And semantic memory is a type of declarative memory. It's a memory for book type facts. So all the 5 schools of psychology, the 5 historical researchers, all those things would fall under semantic memory. But what you wore to bed last night, and what you ate for breakfast, and when your first kiss was, and what your childhood was like, that's all episodic memory. Now we have another form of memory, which is called non-declarative memory. And non-declarative memory is sometimes called procedural memory. This is for your habits and procedures. So it's information on how to do something, like procedures.